Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, we are live. Beau Brooks, welcome to the podcast, man. It's a pleasure to be able to get you to come on.
Man, I'm just tickled to death I get to be on another Beau's podcast.
Yeah, right? It's pretty funny how we met actually too. So both of us are Sitka ambassadors. So we were both out in Big Sky, Montana, which you were actually there for the World Elk Calling Championship, which I sat in the audience. It was the first time I ever watched one of them when you won that here in 2023, which was pretty freaking awesome. And I believe you won it in 2022 also, right?
Yes, I did.
Which was so incredible to be able to watch and get to see it. And I'm like, man, that dude's super talented and he's got a cool name. So we had, afterwards I was at the bar just having a drink and you came up and I was like, hey dude, like just introduce myself and whatever. And we got to talking there for quite a while. And it was pretty cool. And I'm like, man, it's a pleasure to get to talk to you and someone that obviously pours their heart and soul into what you do, and it shows in the results. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, man. It was super fun meeting you and getting to become friends with you through this last probably year now. It's getting close to it, and man, I eat up all your stuff you put out too, man. It's killer. And so
yeah, well, I appreciate that. And what I really like since I've started following you probably for a few years now on social media and everything, was like, I love the educational aspect that you have. And it's something that I strive to do, whether it's through my own experiences or talking to people like yourself that are, do really well in a particular area and trying to help people with it, because like, that's how, I've learned a lot of it's been through just trial and error and experience, but there's so many things like, for example, elk hunting, that without having resources to do it, I don't know if I would be doing it at the level or at the frequency that I am now without having that information. And I think it's so valuable and helpful for people to be able to do that.
Yeah. Honestly, that's kind of how I'm so close to some of this stuff, like the turkey hunting side. I'm super close to it because I've got to learn from all these people on the East Coast because I'm originally from the West Coast. It's just a whole different style of hunting that I've never done before. And so, this is kind of like a back and forth. I'm learning the way you grew up hunting, and then you're learning the way I grew up hunting. And so it's pretty cool. It's like, if I can teach people, because I would not be here, I promise you, without the people that taught me and doing the stuff that I'm doing without people teaching me. There's just no possible way. And every single person I've ever hunted with, I learned something. And so,
yeah, man, I totally agree. And I think that's where it's so, like, I guess when I see the people that are what I consider the best in whatever their field is, and I get to talk to a lot of them, which is awesome. And I see trends in that. It's like all of them love to learn, and they liked, they don't always just think they're the best at everything, even though they might be, but they want to ask questions and learn from other people and see and have different experiences to continually be learning and applying those things to get better and better and better. And that's, it doesn't matter what the trends are in hunting, or maybe something gets more difficult or you lose access to something, but those people still persevere through it. And that's, I think that's really cool, and definitely something I see as a trend across the board with successful, people.
Those people care about everything. People that are super successful, they care about every little detail, every little thing. And if they don't care about something, it's because they've spent so much time trying to figure it out. I just think that the best thing you can explain it as just pure passion, man. Just bleeds through.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. And so I guess with that, before we dive into this pretty deep, do you want to give a little bit of a brief background on yourself for the audience, for anybody that doesn't know you, and just a little bit kind of where you grew up and kind of how you got into hunting like you do now?
Yeah, I grew up in a fairly big hunting family. My dad, Casey Brooks, he's a big elk hunter, if you guys have ever heard of him, and just a super accomplished archery hunter. And honestly, I hunted with him a lot, but I hunted with my mom more. So growing up on the West Coast, my mom and I, elk hunting and turkey hunting and everything, she was kind of my rock when it came to that. She would drive me there. She would hunt, we'd hunt 20 days a season for elk together. And, it's just kind of something that we did together. But, as far as we're probably going to get into turkey, as far as turkey is concerned, I grew up hunting Washington, Oregon, Idaho, California, in my younger years. And my dad, he was not a turkey hunter. So, and my mom, no one in my family were turkey hunters. So that was something that we all got to learn to do together. And so, it's kind of cool, starting from ground zero on something like that, just grow up 3 years old with your dad, just like carrying you elk hunting versus getting to do something where he doesn't know what to do. And he's learning constantly. He's becoming just as obsessed as you are. It was a really cool thing. We're big mountain turkey hunters. We're always walking. We hunt them like elk. Nowadays I've learned a lot about hunting them back east, so what I've done is I've taken the two methods and I've kind of found my happy medium for that. And so it's really set the mantra in how I hunt turkeys and how I hunt in general.
Yeah. And I think that's super cool as far as like how you grew up hunting and mountain turkeys. And I would think, I don't know, and I'd be interested to hear like as far as what some of your Eastern experience has been with turkey hunting. But, a lot of the areas that I hunt and where I live in the Appalachian Mountain region in Pennsylvania and hunted through there, I would think that's, kind of similar to out west other than their Eastern turkeys as far as the styles and the methods. And like, that's one thing that I've loved so much about turkey hunting here and throughout the East Coast is like, and like in the big woods in the mountain region is just running and gunning and just going. And and that's why I love elk hunting so much. And I'm, so green still. I've only been elk hunting for 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is. And it's like, that's what I've come to love about it. And I see so many similarities in it, even though, that's not a popular thing for elk hunters to like to admit, but there are a lot of similarities when it comes to that.
Well, this is how I kind of explain it. And this is how elk hunters, we talk about on the East Coast, a woodsman, right? The woodsman. Well, as being an elk hunter, that's what you are, is that woodsman style of hunting. But that's just what we do. We're sneaking in, slipping in, knowing the terrain, the whole 9 yards. And so, that's a very popular style of turkey hunting, the run and gun woodsman style turkey hunting that's kind of curated through where you live in the Appalachian region. I hunt a lot of the southern, where it starts in Georgia, and I notice the same trends, and so the crossover there and how we hunt and how we're slipping in and walking deep and just putting in the time and miles and stuff. There's a huge crossover there. Obviously, I'm not calling in 112 elk a season. You know what I mean? And so there's obviously some parts of it, but man, I've learned stuff from turkey hunting that I've brought over to elk hunting, and it just goes back and forth for me constantly. And, some of the times where I thought it's funny is I have more patience sometimes with my elk hunting than I do my turkey hunting, because I'm just going to go find another one. Like elk hunting, I'll sit there for an hour and a half just to get one to bugle. And turkey hunting, I'm like, if he's not gobbling that first 30 minutes or an hour, I'm like, I'm finding another one. Even though I probably should put more time in, I probably kill more turkeys that way.
Yeah.
But it's a really, I've actually been wanting to talk about that. I haven't got to really explain it that way after I've really took a hard look, especially with Riven. We launched the elk call brand and the turkey call brand, but they're just so, just so closely related in so many ways, especially how you hunt it. Because what really doesn't, I don't know how to say, like, what really makes it is different is like hunting them like whitetails, right? So hunting turkeys like whitetails versus hunting turkeys like Appalachian mountain runners is a little bit different, which, I mean, you hunt whitetails kind of deep and kind of a little bit different than some people hunt them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just so fun to sit back after you have all this time and experience all over the country. You're like, man, just the turkey hunting out here is maybe a better hunter. The elk hunting out there is maybe a better hunter. Truly, at the end of the day, it's all brought me up into this person that I'm like, I've got my mind and ADHD. I've just got a million things going through my head every time. I'm like, I got this bird right below me. I remember when I had a bull doing that one time and I slipped down, got on the right side of the saddle just to pop his bubble, and then I'm like, it's just interesting. So,
yeah. And man, I think what you said there is so important. Like as in many places that I've, whether it's been hunting elk or hunting whitetails across the country or turkeys or whatever else, like I find similarities. Not everything translates perfectly, but like you find these things in these situations you get in, like just like what you said, you're like, oh, that I've had the situation where a bull was down here below me and, I went down here and did this or whatever. There's things that you start to pick up on these trends. And, even with hunting elk has helped me become better at hunting whitetails, even though I've grown up doing that my whole life of different things I've seen. I'm like, well, why doesn't this make sense across the board? And it does in a lot of situations and cases. And, some of my whitetail skills, I feel like has helped me with elk, where maybe I did need to be more patient in certain situations because I've, from patience of sitting in a tree from dark to dark for 7 days. It's like, okay, you start to learn some of these skills that you can apply to different areas. And it may not be like, I don't like to hunt elk as far as just sitting in a tree stand or in a saddle and doing that for 7 days. I literally go out there to not do that because that's what I have to do with whitetails. But there's different pieces of it that can be applied across the board. And, and the same thing that comes with turkeys in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all comes together, but we talk towards that. I'll tell you the one thing, and we're getting off track, but the one thing I've learned though is every single place I've gone still though, there's always one little piece that's different. So like I go and I think I've got all this in my head. Like let's say I'm hunting North Georgia and I hunt Middle Georgia, and the people from there, they're like, our turkeys don't do that. And I'm like, no, come on. But they don't. There's some situations. So you just got to take everything, go into it with an open mind at the same time. Be like, I'm going to listen, what we're doing here. We're going to like Pennsylvania, it could be, it's like my turkeys in May are just crazy. Maybe yours are still flocked up. You know what I mean? So it's just like super interesting, just, I think the open mind concept and the learning concept. And then what you and I try and do is just broadcast that back because it's so fresh in our mind. We're learning and we're just teaching people what we're learning.
Yeah. And it doesn't, and like the way I always explain it is like, whatever I say does not mean it's right. It's just based off an experience that I've had that's worked in a certain way. And maybe somebody else can recognize that experience and be able to apply it, across the board. And, although we are talking about elk and we are talking about deer and all these different things, I think it all does apply back to what you brought up at the very beginning, as far as being a woodsman and just learning things as they come with it. And one point you just brought up there is like that I think about, with turkey hunting specifically, is like every year I learn new things, and sometimes it's even in similar areas, but it's different than what I've seen before. Or maybe there's something new that's come in and they've logged an area and the turkeys are using the area differently, or it's grown up since I've hunted it in 5 years and now the woods are more open here. Maybe they're spending some more time there, and the hens are nesting in different places. So like you start to learn these things, and it's just being able to recognize it and play off of it in real time and be able to go through that. And I think that's super important. But to kind of go back to your background a little bit with from the calling aspect, and I'm assuming, and I know a little bit about your dad and as far as from an elk hunting perspective, but is he a big, like on the calling side of things? Is that like his main trick, or is he
when it comes to elk hunting? Yes. Like, he's harvested, I think, his ninth 400-inch bull, and he shot every one of them, calling them in every 80, I think his 83rd bull with the bow. And man, that's how he hunts them. If it's just, we did that video the other day for Sitka. Like if we're not there calling, we don't want to be there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of ways that I've slipped in on bulls, get in the middle of them, especially nowadays. It's changed so much since I was a kid, bulls grabbing their cows and running and stuff like that I just didn't deal with growing up. And I've really seen an evolution. But no, dad is incredible caller and very, very, very good at using his terrain, though, to get in their bubble. And then, he's just reads the animal well. And that's it. He's a big, big mule deer hunter too. So, if you're slipping in on mule deer, 200-inch mule deer with a bow, you gotta be good at it. Yeah. I can honestly say I am not 1/10 as good as he is when it comes to any of that. So it's, it's funny. We hunt together now and constantly fight. We're not, I talk about, I'm preaching this like openness, but I definitely don't have it with my dad. Him and I we have so much fun, but I'm like, no, you idiot. We're doing this. He's like, no, why would you do that? Then sometimes I'll be right. And you'll be like, yeah, that's whatever. He'll be right. And he'll be right. And I'm like, yeah, that's trash. And so,
was a one-off. Yeah.
Yeah. He actually never let me call, like turkey calling until I was like 20 something. He wouldn't, when we hunted together, he wouldn't let me even call. And I'm like, my dad, he's like, you can't make that sound right because I'm making all these different noises. I'm like, Dad, I'm telling you, I hunted by myself. I got him to go. Like, it works. And he's like, no, man, stick to the yelp. Just stick to the basics. It'll kill turkeys that way. Okay. Well, then I started hunting by myself a lot. And through the years, and I'm like, okay, I'm calling now. Now he's just like, now if he picks up his call, I look at him, I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, okay.
That's so funny.
We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. So like with that, is that where you kind of got that, like want to having that interaction with the animal and like how you've, become, being just proficient at calling every type of animal, it seems like that's out there and finding a huge passion in that and having that. So explain a little bit about why you like to do that so much.
Well, it's really funny. I've always had that. I've always been drawn to it. My dad's making always lots of weird noises when I was growing up. But, for me, like, man, I've just been like everything. It's not just like the birds, everything. I want to just be there and I want to understand it. And I had pet turkeys growing up just so I could understand them and hear them. And, I've just like always been so drawn to it. Like I can't even explain, like right now, just like the fire that gets me fired up, just thinking about just getting out in the woods and just being it, the sounds that I'm trying to make and never having to, I know it sounds weird, but ever stumble in that situation. Everything I put out, I want it to sound perfect. And I want it to have emotion. I want you to feel it and be like, yeah. And the calling contest side, I've always been super competitive. I started waterfowl call competitions at the age of 9. And so I started doing that. I didn't do a turkey calling or elk calling competition until I was 17 or 18. So, I was just doing waterfowl calling competitions because we didn't have any around us.
Yeah.
And so, all of it though, in my mind, I'm like, I want to be the best at everything. I don't want to just be good at one thing. I want to understand it all, like almost to the point of where I'm like, it's too much that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that passion we were talking about earlier, like to the point of bleeding the passion.
Well, and it's funny you say that because like for me, I've realized that I am not good at everything. So I just feel like I can't be, and maybe that's a bad mindset. So I've really like focused pretty heavily in certain lanes, and like whitetail has been like my main thing and now then I always like, I've been trying to learn the elk hunting side. That's something else. And turkey hunting, something I've done. My grandpa used to make calls, and he's in Earl Mickle's book of World Callers of America. And like, it's still in his late 70s turkey hunts and is really good at it. And like, I've learned a ton from him. My dad loves the turkey hunt and everything. And I've always done it, but I've never put a ton of effort into it because I've always just been like, I can't be good at all these things. But honestly, I think that mindset had kind of, I don't know, I'm trying to get a little bit away from it and get back into like really becoming a student of the game with turkeys and being that way, because I haven't improved my calling in forever. And it's like, basically the way I've had success with turkeys, and I've killed a turkey almost every year, except for the last, in Pennsylvania specifically. In the last few years, I haven't. I've been traveling out of state and doing some other things in the spring, and or just struggling. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get better. I can't just be having these mediocre results. And really, I think too is like, I've always explained it as the way I've turkey hunted is I just do it by persistence. And eventually I find a bird dumb enough that wants to die. And that's, but I've never learned like the real, like, okay, these are the types of calls I should make here and there. But one thing I feel like that I do well is reading emotion in any animal, and being able to kind of pick up on that emotion and make sounds that evoke that emotion back in them, or get them fired up, or be able to do it. It's just like, I need to learn the skills to what you just said of like making those perfect calls, or knowing when to do that, and being able to get those ones that I struggle with to become better at it.
Well, I think that my turkey hunting style is very similar to yours, though, in maybe a little different way. But man, I am searching for the bird that wants to play my game. I don't like messing with the turkeys that don't play my game. If I want to shoot one like that, and it's the only one I've got, I will. I'll just get in there as early as I possibly can, get right underneath this roost tree, and get him to fly down into my lap. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's that, and or get in his way. But if I'm, and it's all it is just time. You would be super successful at it if you just had time. Timing on the calling side is so much more important than any sound that you can make, in my opinion. Understanding when to say it and what to say, like you're saying, reading the bird is so much more important than hitting a cluck purr here. And it's a grab bag full of tools. If you don't know how to use a hammer, then there's no reason to have it in your tool bag. You know what I mean? And so it all comes from trial and error. You're going to hit your hand a few times, but that one time that you miss and hit it right on the head, now you've learned. So it's just like you pull out a screwdriver, a cluck purr, and then he just, and he's there at 100 yards that maybe you've heard off the internet, like, hey, just cluck and purr and scratch leaves instead of calling at him the whole time. Understanding that timing and finding those little successes, even if you don't shoot the bird, and you're eliciting a response, and or he's getting closer, or he's searching for you, and he comes behind you. It's just all that. It's just time. That's all it really is. And it's the same thing with the practicing on the call is time. Like, it's not fair, for what people, they see all this great calling that I do now, but that they don't see is the 7 to 8 hours a day that I would practice every single day, sitting like the turkey call. And I'd be sitting right next to a real hen, or 5 of them that I had as pets. And I'm sitting there listening to them go, and that made my hen in my head. You know what I mean? So I've got different hens that I've heard through my life, and I could tell you right where I've heard it. And it's all learning, and it's all like, it's so much information. You know what I mean? It's just like, but what do I do at this point? It's just like you with a whitetail. Like, what do I do? You got a buck that's got a doe bedded up and it's 32 degrees. I mean, I could tell you 4 different things that I would try and do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the same scenario with like whitetails. And one of the biggest questions I get asked all the time is like, when you're scouting in season and you're going, and I always talk about when you find that hot sign and you need to stop, when you just get that feeling, that gut feeling, like I shouldn't go any further because he's probably bedded somewhere close. And I don't want to bump him. And
it's a turkey thing too, man.
When people are like, well, when do you know when to stop? And I'm like, well, for me, it was just, I've screwed it up so many times that I've learned, like, now all of a sudden, like, I literally get like a gut feeling, like I start seeing things like, okay, there's a bunch of rubs here. The scrape is all tore up. I can smell it. Like, just stop. Yeah. Don't move any further. I take another step. It might be, a bad situation. Maybe I back off and climb a tree here. I sit on the ground or do whatever. And that's, and kind of what you're saying there. A lot of it has to do with the time of spending around them and being able to pick up on it.
Well, I know the best turkey hunters that I know out there have patience. The ones that are very, very successful, and they're very successful everywhere, have patience. I have patience, but I don't have as much patience as them. So there's a lot to be said for that. Harold Knight will sit on a ridge and just scratch leaves for half a day. But in a realistic mindset, not everybody has that type of time, right? My game plan is I do increments, man. And like what you're saying, it's just with a bull. I mean, I hit that wind and I go, okay. I'm like, sit down. I just sit down and I just start calling and I wait. And then I might get him to bugle or hear him raking. And then I might make a move or I might wait. It's just the same thing with a turkey. I stop and I call from great looking setup. Okay. Call. Call. Wait. He doesn't come in. Okay. I'm going to give him a little bit longer, and then I make my next move, which isn't huge. It's usually another move up to another tree. I'm like, I got to get into his bedroom and make him do something. And that's just my style. There's other people that would just sit there and just scratch the leaves, and he would gobble at that, and eventually he may walk by. That's just it's a style thing. I like my style because it's a lot more fun. And if I mess it up, I'll go find another one.
Dude, there's something to be said about finding what you like to do and just learning to be good at it, like, or to have success with it. I've talked to Zach Fehrenbaugh from the Hunting Public many times about whitetail hunting. He doesn't like hunting in a tree. He likes to hunt on the ground and do that.
He's a
like,
stud.
I know he's great at what he does, and he's like, and he attributes it to of like, I love doing that. And that's like what I have fun doing. So I've learned ways to make it work for me. And kind of like what you're saying, where, there's guys like, for example, my grandpa, who's one of the patience guys that'll sit there all day scratching leaves, just making some super soft calls. Like you can barely hear him, just quiet, and he'll just be patient and wait him out. Even if that bird doesn't gobble for an hour, like he just is patient with it. And he may kill that bird a few hours later, sitting in that same spot versus, being the aggressive thing. But in my opinion, it's like finding what you like to do and figuring out how to do it well enough to have the success that you're looking for.
I'm going to steal that. I like that. That's awesome. That's exactly, hit the nail on the head, man. Is that's just, we don't go out there not to have fun. I do not have fun sitting there for a half to 3/4 of a day scratching leaves. And, honestly, where I grew up, if you did that, you'd never kill a turkey. Because our turkeys are just so ADHD. They're just like, I remember we always used to have these guys come out from actually PA and some of these places. And I'd sit there and I'd walk in and I'd see this guy sitting by a tree. And I'm like, oh, sorry, man. And I'd walk in and I knew the guys and I'd be walking out and he's still sitting there. And we met at the truck later that day. And I'm like, what are you doing? And this is before I went out west. This is when I was guiding. I'm out east. And this is before I was guiding there. And he's like, I was guiding on public land. And he's like, man, he's like, no, we just sit here and we call every 30 minutes. And I'm like, dude, like, I appreciate that's so cool. But dude, you'll never kill those turkeys are so ADHD and like, they're gone. If they're not gobbling, those Miriams and Rios, they're gone. They're just like, bye. Unless they're like a super heavily pressured, like May 20th bird. Yeah. That's really smart, that only gobbles every 5 times you call. Then I just treat them like an Eastern again. But man, it's just so interesting. We go back and forth with all this all day. But man,
yeah, no, and so one thing I'm kind of curious of just kind of breaking down, say a morning for you and I guess we'll put it in the context of Eastern birds from the standpoint of like, okay. You go in the morning. Are you typically trying to roost a bird the night before, or are you going in kind of blind to some areas that I kind of explain like the very beginning stages in the morning when you wake up and you're heading out to a spot?
Oh man, when I'm hunting like in the South, man, and I'd never get a bird roosted the night before because they just don't gobble very good. Like if I do, I'm probably going to kill them. You know what I mean? It's just really hard. Like I'm just now getting to the point too, where I'm not traveling near as much and I'm kind of able to scout here. And so, I mean, I'm probably going to be a lot more successful now that I can scout. Like if you have time and you're planning on shooting 2 turkeys in a state, like if you spend your time in March and early April, like figure out where the birds are, where they're roosted. So you have A, B, C, D, and where they're going to fly up and where they're going to fly down. I mean, it's just like getting on them. But all the places I go, a lot of times it's the first time I've ever been there, or I haven't been there for a year. And so like I'm slipping in and I'm listening right off the bat. I usually try to get to, especially since it's the mountain stuff I'm hunting, I try to get to a high point and I just listen. I want them to gobble on their own, if I can. And so I wait for that. And if I can get them to gobble like that, I slip down and I try to not let them know that I'm there. But you know how that goes. Not every morning, especially on public land, that they're going to gobble on their own. And so, especially pinpointing them. So, I heard a really interesting piece of knowledge. I think it was one of these guys I know was hunting with Chris Parrish, and they had 3 birds gobbling, and they're sitting there, and they're like, okay, which one are we going to go after? And they heard there's this one that's just hammering every single time anything makes a noise. He's got one that's over here on the side that's gobbling. He's gobbled like 2 or 3 times. He's like, we're going to go kill that turkey. And they're like, then he was like, what? Why is that? Because that turkey's not going to get messed with, and it hasn't been getting messed with because it's not hammering its head off, and just get in there and play the game with that bird. And so it's really interesting to think, it's always like my mornings are get out there, find the bird that's going to play the game. I try to make my play on it. I'm not super aggressive till about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, because like they always fly down. They always shut up, it seems like, for a few minutes, and they're messing around with their hens and whatnot. I'm just letting them do their thing. If I'm not able to get close enough to the roost, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of times, especially open early season, man, you ain't going to get anywhere near that roost without them seeing it. You ain't going to get within 300 yards of them on the ground if you don't have a ridge between you and them.
Yeah. No, I mean, dude, that makes a whole lot of sense. And like, it's funny you just said that story about Chris, and it reminds me last year opening day, I went to the spot and I knew that the one side of this creek system gets heavily hunted, and it was opening day. I'm like, it's going to get, what do you know? 3 birds go off on 3 different points. And I'm like, man, and 2 of them were just freaking hammering, just going nuts. I'm like, I'm not even going to go after them because I'm going to be sitting here. There's going to be a guy over here in this tree. Well, both of them either got shot or got shot at within like an hour of, morning. People were there and set up or whatever. And then the other bird, I ended up relocating later in the morning and never ended up killing the bird. But it was just, it's just funny just relating back to that story about, the ones that's hammering there, especially in a high pressure type area. It's like probably going to have somebody else chasing in after them at that point.
I've also done days where I just walk right past them. Those gate birds, they're really enticing. They're right at the gate, right off the road. But man, if I can get in and just keep walking past them, and that's where most people are going to stop every day. They're going to stop on that bird. He's probably been called out a bunch. And so what I do is I'll just keep going if I can. For me, 2 miles isn't much for me. Like I'm like 2 miles, I'll just snap my finger. I'm in, and a lot of times, compared to where I grew up, like for turkeys, man, at home, there's people that walk. I mean, you start getting into birds at 4 miles behind these gates, and people would do it every day. But down in like Georgia and whatnot, I get into 2 miles, and I past that 2 mile mark, I'm not seeing many boot tracks. And so, the threshold to getting into birds that aren't getting touched is the bar isn't necessarily too super high, which I really like. That's like, I feel like Superman. I'm like, I'm 2 miles in, man. There's boot tracks in here. The birds are gobbling, and, I'm going to keep going. And so it's kind of interesting. And what I'm usually doing, like, especially like this coming up early season, like I'm trying to get behind the private. So I dive in, like try to get as far as I can in on these mountains, and I dive off the top to get on the edge of the private to call them off of it. Because those are usually the highest concentration of birds, or the birds have moved up the mountain, you know what I mean? But there's a lot of times those birds may not get messed with, you know what I mean? Where at home, a lot of times everyone hunts them on the private, and I'll call them off the private sometimes, but if I can find one that's deep in the public, that means he may not have hens because he's moved up so high on the mountain. It's just the Easterns are a little bit different. I kind of treat them a little bit different. I've had very good success with time and effort and just patience, just calling them off the private, because eventually they roost on the public all the time. They want to be on the public a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's just like elk. I mean, elk, I'm like, why are the elk on the public? Why are you here? Like, there's a 50,000 acre ranch below you. And I used to guide on that big ranch, and I'd always find them on the fence line. Yeah. I'm like, get off the fence line. Like, come on. It's just interesting, like in the heart of it, there's like 2 bulls, and the whole rest of the herd lives right on that fence line because they just loved all the forage and all that stuff that you can find there.
Yeah, that is so true. It reminds me of Montana. The one spot I was hunting was just like that for elk. It was they'd spend their nights and stuff in the private, and they'd come bed right up on the line of the public and the private. And it was super frustrating at the same time because it was like right in that line. I didn't want to hunt close to it and have, a bull, you'd shoot it and run into there. But it was like, you kind of had to play that game because that's the way that they were living. And with turkeys, like what I've seen, especially like in Pennsylvania, is like that they'll, roost up on the hills and kind of fly down and go down. If there's fields or something that are on that private down low, and spend some time in there. And then, mid morning kind of come back up in and work up through
party birds
there. Yeah, the party birds.
Yeah, those are the birds we like to mess with, man. I like that 9, 10 o'clock. You're walking through the woods and you accidentally trip on some leaves and you're like, sit down right against that tree and get ready. You know what I mean? It's just most of my success 10-2, and then again, people won't. It's kind of funny that it's something I found very successful though, because these states that you can hunt in the afternoon is that I want to say it's like 4:30, like right when you can feel the 10-degree temperature drop. And so it's when that sun starts to go down a little bit, you feel the temperature change, and then boom, they start up again. And a lot of times they're by themselves. And you got about an hour right there. I've called in on those really high pressure birds. Some of my best success been right there at the very end. And I don't even know if I'm by the roost half the time. I'm just trolling still. But it just, for whatever reason, when I feel that temperature change, I'll just sit down. I'll try and find somewhere where I can hear, and I start calling. I'm like, there's got to be a tom in here. And all of a sudden I either hear, or he just and comes running in, and I shoot him. I mean, it's so interesting. And that's why Missouri, man, I hate that state. I love it, but I hate it. You go to Missouri and you got to stop at 1 o'clock. And I'm like, every day at 1 o'clock, those birds start gobbling like right there at that time. It's just, the birds in the morning, like, a lot of times I don't even want to hunt the roost. That's my least favorite time to hunt a turkey, is right off the limb.
Well, so Pennsylvania is one of the states that you'll hate because we close at noon for the first couple of weeks of the season. And then at the end of the season, they open it up to all day, being able to do it. But I may be wrong, but I think when I was a kid that it was always just noon, and that was like the stopping point. So I never really hunted much in the afternoons or evenings, never really thought of it. And even to this day, like I've went out a little bit, but it was more to scout for the next morning versus actually putting time into it. But I've heard you say this, and a couple of other buddies that I have that have had success doing that in kind of towards that evening time frame there, and had success with it. I'm like, maybe I should put a little bit more weight on that than I have in the past.
If you know where they're roosting to, it's a really good opportunity. Like having the time and you're figuring them out. Like you know your birds. I can just tell on your face right now. You know your bird's good. It's like, man, like if you can, you just get in there and just. It's so interesting. There's like so many days you get your teeth kicked in, but then you could have like 3 days in a row where you're getting into birds every night. Like I was in Louisiana, and the birds in Louisiana, there are more turkey hunters. I bet you double than there are turkeys in that state. That's a rough state to hunt turkeys in. It's like Arkansas. And I mean, it was fun. We got in there in the morning. I had one bird gobbling really good. Didn't quite get on it. And honestly, I didn't kill a bird while I was there, but I only had a day as I was going down to a wedding. And I went that afternoon and I slipped into the area I was at in the morning, and I had 7 toms gobbling their heads off. Like, cow, 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 cow. No, it's just like, it's right at that time too. I got in there, sat down, started calling, didn't hear anything for a little bit. And as soon as they started rolling though, it's like, pow, pow, pow. I could feel that temperature change. And just something about it, man. That afternoon time, they just usually don't have hens, and they're searching. Even if you don't hear them in the beginning, they're searching, they're looking, and they couldn't remember you from that morning too. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's just there's a lot that goes into it. They're smart animals.
So I want to kind of go back a little bit to, all right, so back to like in the morning time frame when you're talking about like, all right, you don't typically like to hunt them right off the limb unless you know, okay, you know one's roosted here and you can slip in somewhat close enough. What is your goal, like if there is foliage and everything to be able, you want to get as close as humanly possible, or do you have like kind of a buffer zone that your ideal situation would look like to get to?
It just depends on the situation, the time of year. And don't get me wrong, I hunt the roost every morning. I don't, but I could. I'm also filming all the time too. So like if I was just killing turkeys, it'd be different. If I was just killing turkeys and I could get as close as I humanly could, I would, like within 100 yards. You know, if I can handle it and get right in his bedroom and scratch and try and get him to pitch my way, I'm going to probably kill him. You know what I mean? And
that's the other thing. Like when you do get in there, are you just trying to scratch leaves? Are you trying to do any calls? Are you trying to deploy a decoy, or like what are you trying to do?
If I can get a decoy out, I will. If it's dark enough and I know he's in a tree, like early season, I can see him in the dark, and I just a little slippery, just put that decoy out, the strutter or the Jake or whatever. I mean, you know. I love hunting with a decoy. I love hunting without a decoy. You know, there's all that crazy stigma about it, but man, it's I go either way on it. And so, you know, it's like you go and you get set up. If I can stab the decoy, he can see it. He's going to pitch my way. You know what I mean? A lot of times, and he's going to come beat that decoy up. If I get in there and I don't have a decoy, a lot of times I can get closer too, though. Is it's not going to make any noise. So I can crawl right up there and I could get right on the edge and try and get him to pitch my way. It's super situational. And I mean, what's more important, like if I've hunted a bird 2 days in a row, is trying to get to the direction he's going to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so if you get in his way, you'll be very successful.
Yeah. That's one thing that I feel like I've definitely struggled with is knowing, you know, have an idea which way they're going to go, of like, all right, where when they fly down. Now it does help typically if I'm like, okay, there's private and there's a field somewhere or whatever, like, okay, they're probably going to head that direction. That's in my head, that's what they're going to do. But if I get to like just endless timber, it becomes a little bit more difficult for me. I typically try to get like either just above them. Like I find them kind of like deer on points a lot of times, or on the side hills around points. They'll have some hemlock trees or something they might be in, or some big trees around there. And I'll either try to get up on the top there, or kind of on the level on like a side hill logging trail or something where they're going to work back and then just, you know, set up and kind of wait. And I've always done, you know, some soft calls and everything but I never know like, okay, what call should I be making at what, you know, as far as what level of the audio level should I be making it? And that's something that I definitely struggle with a little bit.
I usually, and the first thing in the morning, always err on less than what I'd want to do. You know, there's a lot of times where they start going, and I want to just get right in her face. So I'm just going to go, and just like real nice and pretty. When I'm successful, I still some days I'm like, oh, I'm getting in her face. And it's like 50-50. They fly my way or the other way. But you bring up a really good point. Above them or the same height. Like I hate being below a turkey. Like every time I've ever been below a turkey, I've shot a few of them that way, but they always get up on the hill above you and they strut back and forth on that ridge, and you just sit there and watch him because he can sit up there. He can see, he feels good up there. Like if I can get above him, and I had Mark Drury with me one time, and this turkey was, it was 1, 2, 3 canyons down from us, like way down there. And I started calling, and he's coming. I'm like, okay, we got to get up the hill more. Mark's like, no, we got to be right here. And I'm like, this turkey, I'm telling you, there's a road above us. He's going to go straight up and hit that road. It's just like, it's there. And that's just the thing. It's where you are, right? If I was with Mark's birds probably would have walked right across there, came up. But it's just my turkeys. I know they're going to, the ones that I grew up hunting, that bird's not scared to walk up. He's going to go above me so he could see everything. He was gobbling behind us, and I'm like filming, and they're in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And so, it's just, that's just, and if you have a decoy, you can kind of get away with it more, but just, I always try to get above them. Usually, like, I want to be where there's a ridge between me and them, or something in between me and them, so they have to stick their head over the top.
Yeah. Dude, oh man, that's one thing that I think my dad has taught me, and my grandpa, like, the most, like, ever since I was a kid, of like having your setups to the point where you get to a point, if there's a terrain feature that they have to, when they poke their head, they're in
they're dead.
They're dead at that point. And that's always been kind of one of the things that I always keep in my mind when I'm hunting and doing things. And it is nice a little bit, like, even in the earlier season when there's not as much foliage on, having terrain can help a lot with getting away with a little more, getting closer in situations.
Or even just killing a turkey, because without terrain, man, in that wide open woods, those birds can see like 300, 400, 500 yards. I couldn't tell you how many times I'm sitting up against a tree perfectly still like this, and he's coming. He'll come for 300, 400 yards, but then it gets to like 100 and goes, and I'm like, and so it's just really just interesting how that all plays out.
Yeah. And okay, so like another example is like, all right, you're talking about like a lot of times like 9 o'clock in the morning through, mid morning, you kind of go on there. And are you like, say you heard a turkey in the morning, he flew down, he got with some hens, he's kind of roosted up. Or not roosted up, henned up, but like, what is your kind of play at that point? Like, what do you think is in your head as far as what do you want to do, or I know everything's situational, but even if you want to tell a story that can.
So you think he's got hens, is what you're saying?
He's got hens.
So he's got hens. What I usually try to do when he's got hens, I either try to get in his face and get the hens to come towards me, which I'll do something like, let me see. Yeah, let's get this thing pulled apart. I thought I had it pulled apart. All I'll do is I'll hit them with some cutting, and I'll get in there and I'll go. Just, and then a lot of times, if she comes back with a, then I'll cut her off again, and I'll slowly back it off as they're coming. I'll go back to just kind of trying to keep pulling in that rope. But Mark's really funny. Mark Jury and we're buddies, and he's like, Beau, what I do is I throw the heavy line out first and then pull it in and soften it up. What he does is he throws the soft in, and he starts getting faster and faster as it goes. And so both ways work. But for me, I really like to get her mad and then slowly back it off so she has to come look for me.
Yeah.
And so, it works really well for me. Probably the best case scenario is if they're going a direction. Like, say they're in a riverbank, like a riverbank. A lot of times they'll get down on those little creek beds or riverbanks. They'll be walking it up, get down, try and get in front of them, or they're going to move up this ridge. They've been gobbling on the top of this ridge every day. Just get up there and just soft call, scratch it, and just don't mess them up. Don't steer the hens a different way. Just let them come to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It make the move.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot of sense. And this kind of, back to the reading kind of the emotion of, what the hens are doing. Cause from basically what you're saying at that point, you're more so probably not, and maybe I'm wrong, but you're not going to call that gobbler off of those hens. He's already kind of got them there. You're trying to get the hens to come to you at that point and him to follow.
Yeah, especially early, because they're not going to leave them. If it's a little bit later, I'm willing to wait them out. I will wait for those hens to leave them. I know that eventually what I've done before too is I've just left them too. I'm like, okay, you want to just hang out with those hens all day? I'm going to come back at about 2:00 and I'll see you then, or noon or something, and sit down and start calling. There's just a lot of scenarios. But if I'm going to stick with him all day, I'm going to either try and get in front of him. I'm going to try and, if the hens get back at me, I'm going to make her mad and I'm going to pull her up. Or I'm just going to wait him out and just let him play his game for a while. And eventually, Eastern's it's going to be in their mind. If he's gobbling or whatnot, when he's not gobbling actually means more sometimes. He's just sitting there and he's thinking about it. It's gnawing at his mind. He's like, she's up there on the ridge. She's not talking to me. I can hear her scratching. I need to go see what's going on, but I got you down here. And then she leaves. I've seen it so many times that Tom's strutting like this, and he kind of goes down and pecks at something, and he looks up, and they all just bolt. And they all leave him. And then he's like this. He starts looking around, and he's just cow, 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 just yelling. And then all you've got to do at that point is just literally just anything. And he's just up to you.
Yeah. Do you feel like, do you use mouth calls exclusively, or do you use other calls as well?
No, man. No, I think that it's foolish to just use a mouth call. You know what I mean? There's the box calls sound so good nowadays, and the slate calls. And I'm telling you, every Tom has a hen in his mind that's going to set him off. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, right? So you've heard so many times you're sitting there calling this bird just cow, cow, cow. He's coming up the ridge. You're like, yeah, he's done. He's going to pop. Then you hear, and you're like, oh no. And he gobbles 10 times harder at that hen than you and just runs right to her.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I couldn't tell you how many different times I'm working this bird and I'm sitting there. A lot of times there's a property line below me. There's a private and I'm on the public. I'm calling at this bird and he's gobbling every 3-4 times. And I'm throwing down some good stuff. I'm like, this is some of the prettiest mouth calling I've done in forever. You're not even gobbling. And I pull out this dang box call and I'm like, and it's double gobble. I'm like, what? And I'm like, I'm going back to my mouth call. And I call again, doesn't answer. And then I'm like, I'm like, oh, here he comes. Or my buddy has this terrible box call. And it's not terrible. It's it sounds like this. It goes, it's like that. And it's like, I call it the pterodactyl. And I remember I was calling these birds. There's 3 toms on this other side of this fence. And I'm calling at them, and I'm just hitting them. But they wouldn't move at all. And he starts calling the pterodactyl, and then all of a sudden I see him running up the hill. And I'm like, and he shot one. And he's like, I told you had to bring that. I'm like, trash, man. It's just interesting. It's a different octave. It's a louder octave, right? And so if I run my box call all the time when that bird's not right in front of me because I'm not trying to ruin my mouth calls either. Running them at full capacity is just destroying your mouth call. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And my rule of thumb is if I can get them to answer a box call, I can usually kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
my last 2 birds that I've killed were box calls, and it was just it was really funny on how the one was a Miriam's. Well, I didn't kill that one. My brother did. It was funny. We were bear hunting and ran into a podcast listener that was he had just killed a turkey. He's like, hey dude, there's a bunch of turkeys 4 miles back in here. If you guys want to go in, I'm done hunting there. We went back in, and my brother he was a Montana resident at the time, had a turkey tag, and had all he had to think was a box call. And I was like, well, I'll call for you. And we went back and called that bird in, and it ended up killing it. And then same thing in PA, where it's I hear it so many times, oh, everyone has a box call. That doesn't work in Pennsylvania. There's so many turkey hunters. Man, I still find a lot of times that you can get a bird that goes off of it. And I like kind of what you're saying. It sounds like what you're saying a lot of times is just kind of figuring out what that bird likes.
Wants to hear.
Might have to, when listening, okay, he's responding to that hen, like you said, okay, maybe I want to sound more like that with this specific bird, but that bird over there is completely different and may need something else. So having that toolbox and learning to be proficient with those different tools is helps you out.
Oh, it's 100%, man. It's just having that there. It's just like whitetail hunting. It's you talk to a guy. I remember there's this guy that hunted it was at is my friends at Habitat Flats, and they're like, they had a deer hunter that was in, this old guy, and he's like, I'm gonna go. He couldn't get up a tree stand or anything. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna rattle on the ground. They're like, well, I've had lots of people hunting the area, and you're not gonna call whatever. You just go sit. Shot a 193-inch buck just sitting on the ground rattling. It's like there's so many times that I've been told something won't work in an area because there's so much pressure. Dude, you're hitting them on that day, right?
Yeah.
If it's their day, and I don't care if it's a bull elk, I don't care if it's a mule deer on the rut, I don't care if it's I don't care what it is. If you hit them on their right day, they're going to act right and they're going to do what they need to do. And it could be the right day to hear a box call. It could be the right day to hear a mouth call. It's just trying all those different things. And then if you're not successful, trying the next day, something a little bit different, a different approach. And so I've hunted some of the highest public land, the hardest hunted public land in the country for turkeys. And I run a box call. I run a mouth call. I run a slate call. I crow call at them. I do everything that I normally would do. And sometimes I'll back off and I won't do something because I'm not liking it and I learn from it. But man, just writing something off because you don't believe in it, I think is very, I think it's very foolish in a way.
Yeah. Oh, I know, dude. I think about that with me with whitetails and how I've been with rattling. So like but still, even like in Pennsylvania, a lot of people will tell me, oh, you can't call at all. And I've grunted in most of the deer and have different grunt and bleat sequences that I use. And like, yep. I love the vocalization of whitetails too. And that's like a big part. My dad's the same way with the strategy of hunting whitetails, but rattling is something that's, quote unquote, never worked for us. So it was something that I don't even carry anymore. And I'm like, but I've talked to people through the podcast that have hunted different states and different areas. And I'm like, well, maybe I just wasn't sounding realistic enough. Maybe I wasn't trying, and I said I was going to do it last year and I actually completely forgot about it, but I need to start bringing them again and just trying it and trying different strategies with it and seeing if it would work. Because maybe I'll unlock something with a specific deer that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And it's like, it doesn't hurt to be able to try it.
I totally agree. And I mean, it's just like one of those things. Well, if everybody says it doesn't work, that means no one's doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so interesting. Right here by the house, there's some public land that's called Land Between the Lakes. And I went out there and I called in a turkey this last year. And they're like, you can't call at them except for scratching leaves and clucking and purring. And I got this bird to gobble and I went in there, back, 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 back. And he's like, this came running right in. And I'm like, okay. I will say one thing. That way of calling, though, is tried and true, and it works, and it's just like sometimes if it's not working for you, it's just like a gobble on a mouth call. I don't gobble very often at turkeys, but it's like this last year I called in 4 that otherwise I wouldn't have even got to, and I called them across property lines that I normally wouldn't have got to go, and I just started, it's always my last, is I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I feel good. I'm just going to try it. And then all of a sudden he just gobbles right in front of us. And we're like, oh, get down. And it's every little thing. It's a grab back. Even just the slipping, you're slipping in on a bird and you're like, may only work 50% of the time. But when he does come in, it's like bowed up, ready to rock.
Well, it's funny. I was just, before we got on this podcast, this morning I was driving down to the gym and I had one of your mouth calls that you'd given me, one of your Beau Brooks edition power calls, and I was just messing with it and I'll do that in the truck when I'm driving to places, and I was like, one thing I've never tried to do was gobble, and I was just trying to do it, and it was pretty comical. The result, I definitely sounded like a Jake, if anything, but that was it was pretty interesting. But how do you gobble on a mouth call? Maybe that's not as easy explained here, but.
Let me see. Let's find one. I got a bunch of mouth calls here. So what I do is, instead of like, this is what everybody wants to know though. So what I do is I'll take this call and I'll use the middle part of my tongue, like the middle front part of my tongue, instead of the tip of your tongue. That's why you'll sound like a Jake. If you use the tip of your tongue, you'll sound like this.
Yep.
Your middle part of your tongue. And so I go, tucka, 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 tucka. And then you walk before you run. Tucka, tucka, tucka. That slow. And just practice that before you try and put it all together. Everybody always wants to put it together right off the bat. That's not good for business, man. I'm telling you, it'll be good to learn. And it's kind of just become it's like a kind of a show off thing when I'm calling and whatnot.
Yeah.
It sounds good. But I mean, it's become fairly Easterns out of all the subspecies I've ever hunted react the best to a gobble call. Out of every turkey I've ever hunted, like if you hear gobbling back and forth, they always seem to if they're on the ground, they always at some point come back together. And what I've noticed is I get out there and I start gobbling at them, and I've really had some good success with it, especially when it's in big woods where it can rattle a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. And then, the walk before you run type of deal. I mean, that's like with anything you're learning, but including myself, I want to get to the end. You're like, I want to see how I can do it. And so, I'm just sitting there trying to make it happen versus going through the slow roll. It's like with archery, it's like you don't just start out shooting at 60, 70 yards.
No.
You got to start out with learning how to execute a shot and doing that. And then you have a sight on and then you're
it through
20 yards. And then, you work your way out sort of deal. And yeah, that 100% makes sense. And the last thing I want to ask about the specifics with calling is how much do you put weight on? Do you feel like the specific noises or sounds that turkey make, do you try to understand what they're trying to say, or do you, I guess, how do you think about that? Are you oh, they're doing this, this is probably what they want to hear, or this is a conversational piece that they have, or how do you think about that?
Usually I'm painting a picture, so I'm trying to prove to that Tom that I'm not a hunter. If that makes sense? And so everything I'm adding in, I'm trying to paint this picture of when I'm clucking and purring and adding whines in, I want no doubt in his mind that that's a hen right there. So I'm trying to paint the picture. It's me and another hen just, and so he's like, okay, I see what you're doing there. Okay. And if I listen and I hear a hen, I'm like, yeah, she's mad. I'm going to yell right back at her and make her mad. So she comes in and checks me out. And when I'm calling to a Tom, say it's middle of the day, and I try a few different things, to see what he's answering. It could be just and he answers, and then I'll give him a second. I'm like, okay. If he answers that, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, he's eating up everything I'm throwing at him. And if he doesn't, I'll go back to that hen. So it's I am understanding what they're saying and being very important that what they're saying. You hear the clucks and purrs and the scratching and stuff. That he's just over there screwing around, or you hear him spitting and drumming and whatnot. It's just all of it adds to the graph is in your mind and the realism. You're like, okay. He's going, if you can keep convincing him that you're real, adding, there's some things that you'll add in there that so funny. I'll have my buddy, he adds a sound in that they don't necessarily because it'll kind of shut them down. You know what I mean? But if you're just very concise with what you're saying, you're just, okay, I'm going to try this, yak, 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 and I'm going to add a little bit of scratching in leaves. Okay, he doesn't like that. Back it off. Go back to this. You know what I mean? And so it's just, and if he's not answering the cutting and yelping, kill it. Just sit back. Curiosity kills the cat. Let him think about it for 30 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that, and with your style of moving and being more aggressive, do you put a time limit on yourself as far as when you would make that next move? If he doesn't,
yeah, what I do is I'll do it in between calls. I'll be like, okay, I want to call, but I need to wait a little bit longer. Okay, I've got my phone here. I've got it set for 10 minutes. Just wait and let him do something. Don't call. Especially on the smart birds, that's what I'll do is I'll have my timer on my phone. I'll sit down and look at it, and I'm like, gosh, this is killing me. I want to talk to him, but I'm not going to. Just let him do his thing. Or or maybe it's 30 minutes, or maybe it's 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And just like,
Yeah.
just letting him chew on it some. That's a big deal. And then I'm like, okay, I've been here for 30 minutes. He hasn't moved a muscle. I've given him 20 minutes of silence and he's still in the same spot. I'm going to make him do something.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I like the idea with the phone, because that like forces you to stay true to it. Yeah. Because otherwise you can convince yourself like so much time has passed, or you go through it. But like, I'm the same way where that works well with me. I do it. It's so funny to say this, but like, if I'm hunting all day during the rut, I do it with blind grunting, and I also do it when I'm going to eat snacks. It's like, okay, if I can make it an hour to this point, then I'll eat my next snack. Otherwise, I'll eat everything early in the morning, and then I'm struggling in the afternoon. So it's like, I put these like timestamps. And for me, the way my brain works, like that helps structure me in a way to be, I guess, diligent with it.
I have to do it, man. I can't, my favorite is when they're really interacting with me and we've got a good back and forth and I can do whatever I want. But when you get on really smart birds, you got to put a time limit on yourself and you got to really be concise with what you're saying. It's just like, and it's frustrating, but when you shoot a bird after doing something like that, it's always that much more rewarding.
Yeah. Okay. Now transition a little bit is I want to hear a little bit about kind of what gear you're taking into the woods. Like when you're leaving I know this is also going to depend on the area as far as like from a clothing aspect, and like, you know, whether you're using a vest or a tool belt, which is funny because there's the Sitka film that just came out, Minimalist. And is it Minimalist in Mind or Minimalism in Mind? Minimalist in Mind, which is really good, by the way. I recommend anybody go check that out on Sitka's YouTube channel. But kind of like, all right, what are some things let's start just to make it simple for you from a clothing aspect. What do you start out with? What's in your mind when you're kind of building your system to go out turkey hunting?
Man, early season, I wear my elk hunting, my mountain pants stuff early. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times it's not warm. It's usually really cold, you know, and you know, I'm trying to remember. It's a midweight hoodie, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is.
Like a merino, or you mean or is it synthetic?
No, synthetic. Because I think the merino's new. I like that. The guard stuff is obviously, I have it on underneath it, but man, it's like, I just really like a heavier stuff early season because I don't like being cold when I'm turkey hunting.
Yeah.
And then I can shed into guard. And so like, it's really like, I'm really I've never dealt with bugs like I do here in the South now. And so like, it's having the guard is so important, like for me. But like when I'm hunting out west, it's always the mountain pants, and then I wear my guard, and then I wear my jacket over the top, something a little heavier because it could be snowing that day.
Yeah.
And so, and even in Michigan and Pennsylvania, you never know, man. And so it's like it just depends. And then choosing between the tool belt and the vest is like, we talked about this. I'm like, the way I hunt, I don't want to say for fun, but like for filming versus, it's like different. So when I'm hunting for fun and we're not running a camera, dude, every day of the week, I'm going to run the tool belt just because I don't want anything with me, and I don't have to have a GoPro on my shoulder. I don't have to have batteries in my backpack, and like I can walk farther. I can go deeper. Like I don't carry water with me just because like I think it jinxes me. Like even when I'm elk hunting, like I'll dive into a canyon and I'm like, I'm not going to carry water because if I carry water, I'm not going to kill a bull. Like every time I was guiding, like I wouldn't carry water with the clients and we'd be super successful and then I bring water with us. I'm like, gosh, dude, we got all the way in here. We're like chilling, eating snacks, drinking water. Like we're not hunting hard enough. Let's keep at it. And so like, it's super interesting. And then like, but the vest is I've never been a vest guy. But the vest is like 10 out of 10. Like it's the best vest I've ever used in my entire life. Like it had changed my life. Like I'm down to wear this vest. I love this vest. And so like when I'm filming and stuff, I can fit everything in it. And when I'm not filming, even before the tool belt, I was so happy because I'm not freaking burning up. I don't have something hitting my butt all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just a 10 out of 10, man. It's just to change the way I view vests at least.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, the guard stuff, man, it's changed my life too, though, because I'm not freaking permethrin out like I have to. You know what I mean? It actually works. Like, I don't think we talk about that enough at Sitka, how well that guard system actually works.
No, dude. Like I when it first came out, I did a podcast with Chris Derrick and Dr. Carl Miller about it because so I have Lyme disease. I got it from a tick. We have ticks all over the place. Like most of the country does now.
No way.
Yeah. And like, it's so, and when it really became big as far as being a lot of ticks around here, like I remember being a kid and my dad would be like, we'd tuck our old Army BDU pants into our socks. Like when you go out and being able, now with the Equinox guard that got the internal gaiter that you tuck into your socks. And so I'm a huge proponent of the guard system from the pants to the top. And then I'll still spray like my boots and my socks down with soy or permethrin and like still do the whole thing, but it adds so much to be able to tuck everything in and have like basically no exposed skin. But even when it is hot, and say like a lot of mornings we'll have here in Pennsylvania, it might be 35 degrees in the morning, but it might get up to 70 something during the day, by the time you're around that noon time frame and you're hot. So I like to be able to slim down, and I run hot as it is for the most part. So like for me, I wear the Equinox guard stuff. And then I have the Mountain Evo jacket I like because it sheds water. It's a wind cutter. And then the ambient jacket, which still breathes well so you can move in it.
The ambient is what I wear too when it gets cold. It's just not too heavy.
Yeah, and it packs down so you can, like, even if you're just wearing the tool belt, like you can tuck it in and strap it onto the bottom and it doesn't take up a whole lot of space. Or if you have the vest, you can shove it down in there. I want things that are like minimalist on the clothing standpoint, but still going to keep me warm, because that is one thing that, you hear about it, and I've heard other people talk about turkey systems and clothing, before, even Sitka got into it a lot. And it was always like, lightweight, it's hot. And I'm like, a lot of times in Pennsylvania, at least, it's cold some mornings, there's frosty mornings and stuff that you're out there. And it's like, you got to be kind of looking at it from a layering system like you would for elk. And the mountain pants one that I freaking love too. That's just like an all around awesome pant. And earlier in the season, I'll wear that a lot and just have that sprayed down with permethrin to
not worrying about it as bad either early as the tick stuff. At least for me. But I will say I got one tick all last year, which that was, and I don't spray down my boots. I probably should, but I was getting like 12 a day. Like when I was out turkey hunting in Kentucky and Georgia and whatnot, I wasn't getting them at all. And so like I've had, I didn't pay attention to it as much as I did last year. I was like, oh man, like this is really working for me. I mean, like I truly, but I wasn't hearing the story either. Up until like this year, people talking about all the crazy stuff, which, I've been told about it since I was a kid, but I grew up where there was no ticks, zero, never even had a tick where I was growing up. And so like, and then I go out in my yard and I would get 6 when I first moved down here. I'm like, get off me. What is this? And I actually ran into seed ticks one time. Trash, dude.
Ooh.
Dude, I had to take a bleach bath, and I was wearing shorts that day. Dude, never ever again. Ever. Dude, that was the worst thing ever.
I've never run into seed ticks yet, but when I was in West Virginia, my buddy Josh Ilderton had gotten them really bad and showed me like how his whole entire side of his body was just like bit up and just and I was like, man, I want nothing to do with that stuff, like with those at all. And he's like, you hit a nest of them and you're just screwed at that point. I just whole body, man. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, we're driving back from this like archery shoot, and I had like socks that were pretty tall or something. And I was just kind of a weirdo then. I still am. But I'm like sitting there. I'm like, dude, I am itching so bad. Like, I don't get poison oak either or any of that stuff. So I'm like, what is going on? And I moved my sock and my whole leg would just cover black, like with just ticks all the way up my leg, up my body. And I'm like,
this is the first time I ever went outside when I came here. I went to a little archery shoot on my kids in the summertime. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do something, like just do something when I moved here to work. And I'm like, oh, I didn't go out for another year, do anything. So I'm like, this is not going to happen for me. And it was too hot too. I'd never felt humidity either. And I'm like, that was trash, man. It was so hot.
Dude, that is insane. And I don't think, we talk about that enough, or anybody does, as far as like the tick side of it. And I remember I did like an educational video on Instagram, a reel or something a few years back, and talking about the guard system, and then also how I'm spraying things down and the frequency of it with Sawyer stuff, and like looking at it, and someone's like, I don't want those chemicals in my body. I'm like, well, I can tell you right now, from someone that had Lyme disease that ended up turning into having all these other problems with food allergies and having all this joint pain and everything, I will take, even though that you're not spraying it directly on your skin, and even the stuff that's in the, Sitka has it done already from the beginning. Like, I can promise you whatever problems that you may have, which aren't even proven to be able to have from it, are way less than having a lifetime of dealing with Lyme disease and having to go through that. And me personally, that's how I view it. And I think it's super critical from that standpoint. And I'm always cautious of it and being aware.
Now I'm even more of a believer. Golly, man, now I'm going to go home and spray my stuff down. I just didn't grow up around any of this stuff. I'm still learning. It's crazy.
Well, and the water thing is crazy to me, because I carry a lot of water, and that was always like my one thing on why, like, when I first got the sample of the turkey tool belt there, I was like, man, I don't know if I can carry enough water with it. But I ended up, what I did was using either the bottle system from Sawyer that has like the water filter where I could just go to a stream and fill it up and dip through the straw on it, or I'll take the cap off it, which actually fits on my Nalgene bottles. It holds a little more water. I can put that and do that, so I'm covered. Or I'll use a bladder if I'm using the vest. But man, I'm a water guy. Like, I need my water. That's just me.
Well, I've really gotten to where I like water too. I'll be honest though, man. This is something from the film. We were doing the film, and dude, I didn't even know what a Nalgene water bottle was. These are like, hey, do you have a Nalgene that we could put? I'm like, what is a Nalgene? What are you talking about?
Really?
I had no idea.
All the time.
I had no clue. And they're like, what? And then I went to like Dick's Sporting Goods looking for one for the shoot. Because I'm be honest, like, I carry, like, if I do carry water, I just grab one of the water bottles and I just rock it. Yeah. And dude, it's like, but that being said, this is not safe, kids. What I do is not safe. Like, not going in, like, I'll dive in like 3-4 miles, and by the time I'm getting out, I'm like, but I'm like, oh man, I got into them good. It's because of my stigma with water. If I carry it, I'm not. It's like I feel like the world is going to reward me for like going through the pain of not having water.
You're kind of like an old timer, and I shouldn't say old timer, because then my dad's going to say I'm calling him old, but like, my dad's generation and older, I feel like they just didn't need water. Like, they never carried water when we were hunting or doing anything. We're out all day. And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like maybe I'm a little softer, but I need a lot of water.
Oh man, my dad never would bring water, and my dad never brings food either. And so like, and even duck hunting, like, so duck hunting is like just eating snacks all day.
Yeah.
I just never. Dude, it's just wild. I started being around people who are like cooking in the blind and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, dude, what is this? How many? You guys give me some more of those Pop-Tarts. Now I always just have like in my truck, I just have like a bunch of random, like terrible for you snacks. Like, get some Skittles and I'll live all day off it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Peak physical fitness here.
The one other thing that one of the questions, we answered a bunch of them that people had submitted in, but one of them was, if you're carrying a slate call, is there any preferred like type of call with it when it comes to slate that you like the sound better than another?
It just depends, man. And so out of all three of the calls, my least favorite slate, like I just don't like the sound as much, but it's a kind of a necessary evil I carry with me.
Yeah.
We make a few of them at power calls. I think they sound amazing. I've used really high end ones that people build. The only thing is, man, they always get wet. And then I'm sitting there and I can't even make a noise on them. You know what I mean? That's the hardest part. I'm a big slate guy, big crystal guy. And really, like, I don't know if we're going to be able to see this, but holding it like a crown, I don't know. This instead of, it'll make it sound more like, instead of like when a lot of people hold it like this, you know, it's getting really, it loses that pop. And so you can get a lot better. Whereas it's got those holes on the bottom that are meant for breathing. Let them breathe so you can get the full range of sound. The only time I close it off and put it flat on my hands when I'm clucking and purring, is like,
yeah,
it makes it real pretty. So
yeah, no, dude, that's awesome, and it's pretty cool to kind of hear your system. And I like the idea of like, or not that it really matters my opinion with it, but that you have different calls, and it's like, even though you're, you know, known for your mouth calls, but like in how you run them, but just like being open-minded and seeing like, okay, there's multiple ways to skin the cat here, and like think and reading the bird and being able to do it. And like one of the biggest takeaways for me from this conversation is really reading the scenario and being a true woodsman of like learning the birds that you're hunting. Cause you can't, like, I don't care who you are. Everything that anybody says that have had success in a certain way is based off of their experience, and it doesn't always perfectly apply. So if you were to say, oh, the only call that I use is this batwing call, and that's what I'm using, and this is it. And it's like, okay, maybe that works for this scenario, but you know, a turkey here may not like that, or this situation.
What if he's like 5 ridges over? He can't hear you.
Yeah.
This is what I preface to everyone I tell. I was a bad caller at one point in time. I've not always been good at turkey calling. I mean, I grew up not very, like, I just ran a box call. Didn't even run a mouth call for the first 3 years I hunted turkeys. You know what I mean? I've killed turkeys. I had to, up until I was about 19 years old, I was not at that next level turkey calling that I am now. I've always had to maneuver. I've always had to slip. I've always had to try 10 different calls to get one to go. Just what really the mouth calling is really just become a cheat code is all it's really done for me. And that's it. And out of all the calling that I've ever done between waterfowl, between elk, I immediately see the results from turkey calling from good mouth calling. So like those birds that I hit with a box call or my mouth calling before I could do a 2-note yelp would take me an hour. Now it's taking me 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just come right in. And the same areas, they act the same every year. And then I started mouth calling it next level, like a next level type of calling and adding everything in. It's like, okay, this isn't working. That's not working. Okay, boom. Okay, I've got you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's still plenty of birds that give me the runaround, but it's just interesting, you know, to see the immediate reaction. So.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And it's definitely inspired me to get better with it and learn some more. And I think like for me personally is like from taking out of this, it's like, I need to really get good at learning the basics of the different types of calls. And then when the situation applies, I'm not handicapped by my own abilities to be able to make that sound or try it to see if he's going to respond to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. And it's like, what happens when you're at that point where you've let out all your rope, right? I've got 500 feet of rope where if you just run a box call that yelps this loud, you've got 20 feet of rope to pull them in. So you're going to run out of that rope really quick. But if I have a long rope, like box call, slate call, you know, cutting, slipping, get around and pop that bubble. You know what I mean? There's so many different things I can pull. And sometimes I pull too fast and I fall on my face, but there's other times that it keeps me up and I just get him right at my feet.
Yeah, no, dude. Yeah, 100%. And I've one thing also that why I want to get better with mouth calls is the less movement too of
Oh yeah, it's a big
running.
deal.
It is a big deal, and is running, calls and being able to do that where, everything, you have your face mask pulled up or anything, and you might have your kind of hand up there, but you have a glove, or maybe you don't even need to, depending on the situation, but it's just less movement than having to move with the box call or the slate. Or me, I leave everything. You can, if you go to trees, I sit by turkey hunting, you'll probably find a slate call here. You might find this here. I lose stuff all the time, leaving them in places. But yeah. Or I'm like trying to reach for it when a turkey's coming in and I can't remember where it's lost in the leaves somewhere that I threw it down. It's just, yeah.
Well, that's it. With the turkeys coming in, a lot of people, they don't call at them. And I kind of just put this together just now. Man, a lot of people don't call at them because they're running a box call when they're coming. I'm pretty bad. Like I get a bird, like he's at 70 yards and he's kind of going to my left, and I'll just go, and he'll just, I want to hear him, and he's that close. I want the whole meal deal. I didn't come this far to not hear him gobble. So, and a lot of times I got a camera in my lap, so I'm like sitting there and I'm like, and
yeah,
I'm like, okay, cool. That was cool. That was cool on video. Just keep them coming. And so
that's freaking awesome, dude. And so if people wanted to learn more, because you do a lot of really good actual tutorials on calling and stuff, and for all of your content, where can people kind of go and find some of that?
The most of the stuff that I've got compiled is on TikTok. So just Beau Brooks turkey calling on TikTok or elk calling. You'll find plenty of stuff, and I've got tabs in there. It's like tutorials, and we go through all of it. And honestly, I actually am pretty good about answering too. Like I try to answer every single message I get on Instagram, and people send me videos on their calling, and I try and help them out. If it takes me a few days, it's just because I'm hunting usually, but we try our best to just to answer everything we can. And there's a lot of calling scenarios. I mean, there's just a guide to turkey hunting. So it's on from our perspective, obviously, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I've followed along on TikTok and then also on Instagram, and then seeing some of the stuff you did. I think it was called Top 5 Calls, just a short piece for Sitka. And like those videos have helped me out a ton, and you're really good at, I guess just dumbing things down to be able to understand them in a way that something that might be, somewhat complicated to people like myself, and being able to explain it in an easy to digest way. And I value that. So I definitely recommend everybody go check that out and check out your content, and then also your calls. So explain kind of the call companies, power calls, and then is Riven separate on the elk side?
Yes. Power calls. I was brought in 7 years ago for power calls to design these calls. It was a waterfowl company and work at Higdon and whatnot. I did the decoys, turkey decoys here, but no, I've got a line underneath it. All the calls are my design. Power calls, so www.power-calls.com. We hand make them all here in Western Kentucky. They're they've really become a hit through the years now. Yeah. It's really fun from going from maybe selling 100 a year, or when I had my Brooks custom calls back in the day, selling them out of my backpack, to where we're at now, and then the Riven side, I started it this summer, the elk call company. We got the wood bugle tube and all that stuff. It's pretty next level. And I'll tell you, I've taken a lot. I think the best call builders in the world are turkey call builders, the people that understand the layering, the latex, the quality, everything. And I've taken what I've learned there and I brought it into the elk side, something that we haven't done before. So
awesome. Well, awesome. I hope everyone goes and checks that stuff out, and I'll be running the calls this year and playing around with it. So super pumped about it.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, and appreciate it, Beau.
Okay. I'm going to ship some more calls out.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.